Yeah, a little bit sleep deprived, but it was good television.
What's your reaction to the landslide victory for Boris Johnson?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate Prime Minister Johnson. It's an enormous victory for him on a personal level and also a very clear result for his party. I think it's a positive thing that we have a decisive outcome in Britain in their elections. We had for a few years a parliament that wasn't able to form a majority around anything. We now clearly have a majority in the House of Commons to ratify the withdrawal agreement. So next steps is to ratify that withdrawal agreement, which guarantees no hard border between North and South, guarantees the protection of the common travel area, and also the fact that British and Irish citizens' rights will be protected. I'm keen to work very hard with Prime Minister Johnson on getting the Executive and Assembly up and running again in Northern Ireland. I think that's absolutely crucial now and has to be a key priority for the next couple of weeks. And then we go on to the next phase of Brexit, which is negotiating a mighty new future economic partnership between the EU and the UK, and I think that can be done.
A lot of emphasis on level playing field in that trade negotiation. What do you think that means, and how important will that be for Ireland?
Well, what I'd like to see is a new future economic partnership, a trade deal, if you like, or a trade deal plus between the UK and the EU, including Ireland. I'd like that to ensure that we still have tariff-free and quota-free trade between Britain and the European Union, and that there's a set of minimum standards so that nobody feels that there's unfair competition, that anyone's trying to undercut them when it comes to labour rights and when it comes to environmental protection and issues like that. And, you know, my conversations with Prime Minister Johnson, I think he's probably in a similar space. So it's a case now of getting on with it, and I think the prospect is there to develop a new future economic partnership between the EU and the UK, and one that's going to be mighty and one that's going to be good for all of us.
Does this clear the way for a general election at home? Because it seems certain now that the UK will leave the EU at the end of January. That signals the end of the confidence and supply agreement you have with Fianna Fáil. So does that clear the way for a February general election, or is your preference still for May?
Well, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit there. First of all, we want to see the withdrawal agreement ratified so that we can have that orderly Brexit. And secondly, I think there really has to be a focus between now and January 13th on Northern Ireland and getting the Assembly and Executive up and running. So that's going to be the focus. I've always said that the election, if it's my choice, it may not be my choice, but if it is my choice, the election in Ireland would happen at the right time for the country, and that's still not yet.
Your reaction to the results in Northern Ireland last night?
Yeah, I think they're very significant results in Northern Ireland. I think 2 or 3 years ago I said that the political situation in Northern Ireland was like tectonic plates shifting, and if you know about plate tectonics, you'll know that things move slowly and also suddenly. Slowly because of demographics, and more suddenly because of the reaction of people in Northern Ireland to Brexit. So this is a significant result in Northern Ireland, but not dissimilar to the one in the European elections or the last Assembly elections. No unionist majority, no nationalist majority, and an ever-expanding centre ground. But one thing that it hasn't changed is that the best future for Northern Ireland is one based on power sharing, one based on reconciliation, one based on bringing all communities together, and the next step in that has to be getting the Assembly and Executive up and running before January 13th. So the Taoiseach and I, once I'm back in Dublin anyway, and he's already back there, we're going to be giving this everything between now and the middle of January to get the Assembly and Executive up and running.
Movement on that next week?
I hope so. I know the Prime Minister is going to be busy putting together a government and doing other things, but I don't think we've any time to waste because the deadline is January 13th. If at that point there is no power sharing restored in Northern Ireland, we're then looking into another Assembly election in Northern Ireland, and I can't imagine who would really want that.
How relieved are you personally that you have clarity now and that you don't have to deal with another hung parliament?
Well, I'm relieved for my country and I'm also relieved for the UK. We've really had deadlock and gridlock for 2 or 3 years now. That is now going to pass. I deeply regret that the United Kingdom, our friends, are leaving the European Union, but that's their decision and they've confirmed that now with this election. So for us, it's a case now of getting Northern Ireland working again, getting the withdrawal agreement ratified, which gives us the guarantees that we always needed around there being no hard border between North and South, and citizens' rights of British people in Ireland and Irish people in Britain being protected, and then to move on to the shared objective that the Prime Minister and I have, which is to negotiate a deep and comprehensive future economic partnership, a trade deal plus between the EU and the UK, and I think that's in all of our interest now.
Okay, thank you. Well, there'll be an opportunity for questions later.
I don't think I'll answer that one. I did hear what Mike Nesbitt said, though, and I thought he made some good points.
BBC, you say the tectonic plates are shifting. Are they shifting in terms of United Ireland?
You know, I think we've seen, without doubt, a big change in the political landscape in Northern Ireland in the last 3 elections, the Assembly, the European Parliament elections, and now the House of Commons elections, which show that neither nationalists nor unionists have a majority anymore in Northern Ireland, and there's an expanding centre ground of people represented by the Alliance Party and others. So that is a change. But what hasn't changed is that the future, I believe, for us in Ireland is reconciliation, it's power sharing, it's closer cooperation between North and South, and also between Britain and Ireland. And that's the philosophy underpinning the Good Friday Agreement. So, you know, I think people shouldn't race ahead of themselves with other plans. What we need to do is to get Stormont, to get the Assembly, get the Executive working again. We need to be able to work together in Northern Ireland and between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and that philosophy underpinning the Good Friday Agreement is as relevant today as it was 30 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Does the clarity of the result in Westminster, in your view, make it easier to strike a trade deal next year?
I think it does. Striking a trade deal by the end of 2020 is enormously ambitious, but we won't achieve it if we don't try, and we're determined to try. And I think the fact that Prime Minister Johnson has a clear majority and has been given a big personal mandate as well makes a big difference. It was difficult for the last 2 or 3 years dealing with a House of Commons that wasn't able to come to a majority decision on anything in relation to Brexit. That's now going to change. I think the Prime Minister's hand is strengthened, and from our point of view as Ireland and the European Union, it's always easier for us to be able to negotiate with a partner who has a strong personal mandate and can control a majority in their parliament.
And what is your interpretation of the result in Northern Ireland, which has proved controversial for the unionist parties?
Well, I think in many ways the result in Northern Ireland shouldn't be a surprise. The tectonic plates of Northern Ireland politics have been shifting for quite some time, in part because of demographics, but more recently because of the opposition of the majority of people in Northern Ireland to Brexit. And we've seen now 3 elections, the Assembly election, the European Parliament election and the Westminster election, in which neither unionists nor nationalists have a majority, and there's a growing centre ground. What that says to me is the future is exactly the one that we envisaged under the Good Friday Agreement. We need to restore power sharing, need to restore North-South cooperation, and we need to make sure that Britain and Ireland continue to have a very close relationship, and that's what I'm committed to do.